All right, hello everyone. Welcome to another UFC breakdown. This time we got UFC 326 Holloway versus Oliveira 2. Let's get right into the picks and predictions. All right, starting off the card at light heavyweight, we got Luke Fernandez taking on Oscar Award winner Rodolfo Bellato. We got Luke Fernandez coming in as a slight favorite. Rodolfo Bellato, honestly, is more known for the antics against Paul Craig. It actually probably should be more known for the very rare Tapology Rainbow that another fighter on here actually produced. Right, 4 fights, and he's got a win, a loss, a no contest, and a draw. That's pretty impressive, honestly, especially at a division as volatile as light heavyweight. But facing a little bit of an uphill battle here. But let's talk about Bellato first. Kind of a flat-footed, slow striker, but there's obviously some power there. Good grappling, decent wrestling, kind of just a decent all-around fighter, but he is a grappler at his core, just like the way Fernandez is a wrestler at his core, right? Very green on the regional scene, right? Just knocked out a guy that, I mean, I'm not even kidding about this, by the way. If you watch Luke Fernandez's opponents' last fights, like on the Contender Series, like the dude was like fighting in high school gyms with like dwarf ring girls, and I'm not even kidding too. I'm not making this up. You go watch. I believe is Pellegrino. I believe that's what his opponent's name was. But you watch his prior fights, you'll see the craziest shit. But talking about Luke Fernandez, wrestler at his core, as I said, but he's got decent boxing fundamentals too, especially for a guy only 6 fights into his career. I do like what I see from Luke Fernandez in these spots, but like I said, a little bit green, but has fought 5 rounds, not the full 5 rounds, but he has fought 4 rounds before in professional MMA, and I like him in this spot as well. Listen, Adolfo Bellato, for all the experience he has, I like the same things that happened in the first couple fights kind of jump off the page, right? Very flat-footed, just a slow striker, and I think Fernandez, being the much quicker, much at least younger in MMA years athlete, is going to be able to find takedowns when he needs to, use wrestling to get on top. I think he's either going to knock Bellato out on the feet, or he's going to find a ground and pound finish late into this fight. So give me Luke Fernandez in this fight. I think he wins the fight by knockout. All right, another light heavyweight fight coming up. Usually that's not good, but it should be a decent fight. We got Rafael Tobias taking on Fat Bum Nurgozhay. And I say that not because like he made weight this week, but you talk about having a horrible UFC debut, having a horrible start to your UFC career. Meet this guy who was a pretty high prospect coming off Contender Series, right? Had a head kick knockout, all that sort of stuff. But then you go and you look into your UFC debut, and it's like misses weight by 5 pounds, and then he gets submitted from a Kimura from the bottom, which is not something you see every day. Then he loses by Ezekiel choke, which is even more bizarre. So, bit of a confusing stretch for Nurgozhay. And then the game plan's going to be simple for Tobias, right? Get this guy to the ground either by knocking him down, which he has been his past 2 fights, or by just taking him down, and you'll find the submission. Little bit, skeptical because Tobias' striking is not very good, right? As you saw in his last fight, was fighting another guy who just should not be on Contender Series. And, he did win the fight by first round submission, did hurt him on the feet, all that stuff. He had a negative striking differential in that fight, which is, he wasn't fighting anyone who you should have a negative striking differential against. And he had a lot of control time in that fight, too, which is very, very concerning. But in terms of this fight, he should be fine, right? Find the takedowns, find the control, find the submission. That should all be there against DR. He's shown very, very poor grappling defense, and I think Tobias can be another one to exploit that. Tobias wins this fight by submission, in my opinion. Don't bet on either of these guys if you want to keep your money. All right, next fight at flyweight. This should be a pretty good fight. We got Sumudaerji taking on Jesus Aguilar. Sumudaerji is starting to shrink as a favorite a little bit. He was around minus 250, coming down. He's now below minus 200. And I see the love for Jesus Aguilar everywhere, right? On the YouTube, on Twitter. I see everyone, picking Jesus Aguilar, betting Jesus Aguilar, but and maybe I'm just a Jesus Aguilar hater, right? Because he does have the great guillotine, right? Crazy guillotine, been submitting people left and right, all that sort of stuff. But when I look at this guy, I'm not really crazy impressed by his overall, game, right? The striking, despite, he does his best with the reach he's provided, little T-Rex arms, but the striking just isn't very polished, in my opinion. The takedowns, obviously he can pull that guillotine from standing or from, his back and stuff like that, but his wrestling, I don't think is as good as it needs to be. A takedown a guy like Sumudaerji, has been submitted, a lot, right? 7 losses, 6 by submission. So very, very concerning. when he does get taken down. But I think the thing is, I think he will stay on his feet because he has a crazy reach advantage, crazy height advantage. Just overall, just experience edge is going to go to Sumudaerji in this fight. I think he just is. And the thing I like about Sumudaerji is he uses his range in fights too. He uses the side kicks and the kicking from range and the jab too. He's got his whole bag of strikes that he uses very well to keep shorter fighters at bay. Obviously, we've seen him struggle against the bigger guys in the weight class, but Jesus Aguilar definitely not that. And also, he just hasn't fought the best level of competition. To be frank with you, 4 wins in the UFC. None of those guys have a single UFC win under the belt, right? Which is concerning to say the least. In the Mendonca fight, you could have scored that for Mendonca easily. So I got to go Sumudaerji in this fight. I just don't see it from the Aguilar standpoint. I mean, I get it if you're picking him by submission because Sumudaerji doesn't seem to have very good grappling defense, but I'm way too confident in Sumudaerji striking to think he's going to lose this fight. So I think he wins the fight by decision. All right, banger of a fight coming up. We got Cody Durden taking on Yamjargel Tumendemberel. Hope I'm saying that right. We got Cody Durden as a slight dog, and he has been a dog throughout his UFC career, right? Not the betting kind, but this guy's been in a bunch of banger fights, right? The problem is, the durability is starting to fall off the proverbial cliff there because, well, he does bring it every fight, right? Good boxing, not the best defense, but the volume he's able to put on, it doesn't really matter in most cases. So great boxing and nonstop wrestling, right? He hasn't really wrestled as much as of yet. God, I butchered that so badly. He hasn't wrestled as much recently, right? In his losses to Ochoa and Nascimento. Not a lot of wrestling, which I get against Nascimento, but it is a little bit concerning because we've seen the weaknesses in the defense. We've seen it time and time again, right? He gets hurt quite a bit on the feet. And that's mainly just because of, one, his durability. But the reason that keeps getting exposed is because he's very, very reckless on the feet, right? Comes forward, combinations, doesn't back up. And what happens when you don't back up is you're so open to counter. You see getting counter punched, getting put out, dropped, all that sort of stuff. And listen, Tumendemberel is a perfect guy to do that, right? Super young and super, super powerful on the feet, right? When he gets a guy hurt, he just absolutely does not let off the hook, right? And we saw that a little bit against Carlos Fernandez. He lost that fight, but had been a whole lot of trouble early, but got way too aggressive on the submission game, right? That is one thing I'd like to see, Young Jargle improve a little bit is when he gets a guy hurt, he is very, very aggressive with the subs, but almost to a fault, right? When you're facing a good grappler, that's going to be a really big problem. But I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem against Cody Durden because he's been liable to getting finished in so many of these fights. I just feel like if Tumendemberel hurts this guy, he's not going to let him off the hook. So for that reason, I got to go Yamjargel Tumendemberel to win by submission. This fight should end inside the distance, but absolute banger of a fight for anyone that's watching this. All right, next fight at the featherweight division, we got Alberto Montes taking on Ricky Turcios. Two guys I haven't been the highest on in the past, but they're here now and they're fighting in the UFC. We got Alberto Montes, who's the slight favorite. And I usually don't say, specialist often because people are so well-rounded in modern MMA, but Alberto Montes truly is a specialist, bit of a one-trick pony, but when you're so good at the front headlock position, usually it doesn't matter. And that's what Alberto Montes is, right? That front headlock position when it gets people down, either standing or on the ground. He's a master at transitioning from, Darce, Anaconda. He does have a good guillotine as well. But it is mainly the Anaconda choke that he's getting people with. And he is so slick. He's so quick to scoop up the neck, put the arm in, and just death roll. And you see him tap out so many guys, including the Contender Series fight against Calderon, where, there were a little bit of concerns, right? Because Calderon was just a bit of a brawler, right? He was just coming in there swinging wild, and Montes didn't like it on the feet, right? And that's what I have. The problem I have with Montes, if he's not able to Darce, these UFC level competitors, will he, survive on the feet? Because I've seen his striking defense. It's not, there's not a lot of it. It's mainly just shelling up and backing up and just looking to circle out. And there's not too much striking offense as well. So, if there's not a lot of, fluff behind the takedown attempts or the submission attempts, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble in the UFC. But Ricky Turcios, luckily for Montes, not a crazy dangerous guy, not a very great fighter either. And I mean that with utmost respect because Ricky Turcios is a hard worker, right? Has great cardio, great scrambles, but there's just not a lot of danger factor when you're looking at a guy like Ricky Turcios because there's not a ton behind the strikes. He hasn't really been able to put anyone in danger, aside for Brady Highstand. But the scrambles are very, very good on the Ricky Turcios side, right? He's got a good bottom put game, good submissions from top as well. We haven't seen him get top that much, but when he does have it, right, he is ultra aggressive when he's in that position. And I've been pretty, rough on Ricky Turcios in the past. I don't think I've actually picked him in a single fight in his UFC career, but I will actually pick him in this fight against Alberto Montes to my own surprise because I thought I'd never pick this guy. I thought this guy was trash, and I thought, there's no way with this guy's weird striking and lackluster takedown defense he's going to get it done. But I think he gets done in this fight in particular because I don't love what I see from Alberto Montes. Right, I know he's got the great Darce and Anaconda, but like I need to see a little bit more before I'm able to pick a guy against an established UFC veteran. So to the surprise of myself, I think Turcios can win this fight by decision or maybe by a late finish. My bad. Okay, we got a middleweight fight between Dante Johnson and Cody Brundage, and to no surprise at all, Johnson the minus 900 favorite. He should clean this guy's clock, right? To be frank and honest with you, this fight should not be close. Cody Brundage, to his credit, a little bit better than 11-8-1, but we've seen him lose the mental aspect of the fight quite a bit, and that's obviously a problem when you're fighting someone, especially these UFC caliber opponents, train their bodies, but mainly their minds. When you have a lot of as many mental lapses as Cody Brundage does, that's a big problem. And he had another one in his last fight against Cam Rouston where he was doing pretty good in the striking early, but abandoned his takedown attack, abandoned any reasonable striking, just started bombing overhands, and obviously against UFC level competition, that's really not going to work. And Dante Johnson, to his credit, has shown an impressive composure for a guy with only 7 fights. Impressive, durability, speed, power, all that sort of stuff. This guy's an absolute freak athlete. He's also a lot taller than 5'8". I know I saw, the weigh-ins and stuff like that. Dante Johnson's definitely taller than 5'8" than what they have him listed at. But, he's an absolute tank, right? Incredible reach, incredible power, all that sort of stuff. He's evolving at a rapid rate, but he's still a little bit green, right? There is going to be, a spot to fade him in the future, but not this one. I think Dante Johnson knocks him out pretty early in this fight. All right, featured prelim, we got Cody Garbrandt taking on Xiao Long. If you see my Twitter, spoiler alert, you probably already know who I'm picking for this one. But we got Cody Garbrandt. Everyone knows kind of his fighting style at this point. Fast striker, good power in the hands, can wrestle if he needs to. He does have a very, pretty high-level wrestling background, but I'm going to go on a little rant here and say that the Cody Garbrandt that everyone thinks about, right? And, what is the Cody Garbrandt that people think of when you hear the name Cody Garbrandt, right? And I guarantee you 95% of the people say Dominic Cruz. All right, we're back at the main card. Opening up, we got Gregory Rodrigues taking on Bruno Ferreira in a rematch from about 4 years ago, if I remember correctly. Gregory Rodrigues, the loser of the first fight, is the minus 155 favorite this time around. Bruno Ferreira plus 135 on the comeback. And do disregard this image of Bruno Ferreira too. This doesn't do justice to how good he looked on the scales this morning. He was, probably the leanest he's been in his career, right? Especially after the Marvin Vettori fight, which is a pretty bad look on his part, missing weight by a few pounds. Looked great on the scales this morning. Probably also why the odds are tightened a little bit. But talking about these fighters, these two are, pretty high-level grapplers that just love to stand and bang on the feet, right? Crazy power for both of them. For Gregory Rodrigues, tall, long, explosive grappler who, like I said, loves to just stand and bang with a lot of these guys. And he has success doing that in the UFC, right? High-level BJJ black belt, great wrestling, takedown offense and defense. But, as you see, he has a ton of success striking in these fights. And he's evolved his striking over the years, even making adjustments and, improvements at 34 years old. So, I love what I've seen from Rodrigues as of recently. The cardio issues, while there is, I believe, some in 5-round fights, I think he's fine in 3 rounds. I mean, it's a little bit overblown. The Cannoneer loss is a little bit overblown on his cardio issues. But as we've seen as of recently, it's kind of evolved his striking game a little bit. Now, not just a pure headhunter, he'll go to the body like he did in his last fight against Roman Kopylov. He went to the body a lot in that fight, and he set up those headshots that hurt him in the second round. And he was able to find more of those, hard-hitting shots in the third round and win that fight dominantly. So I'm super impressed by that performance against a high level kickboxer, win that kickboxing fight. And he's fighting Bruno Ferreira. Again, another high level judo background on his side, but like I said, loves to stand and bang. Has gone to submissions quite a bit recently with submission wins over Jackson McVeigh and Armin Petrosian. But as I said a lot, mainly a striker, right? Pretty short for the weight class. Not the best height and reach, but will throw bomb those overhands. Has spinning attacks, both the kicks and the back fists and elbows and stuff like that. But I think the issue that Fajita is going to run into in this fight is if he's not able to find that early bonk on Rodrigues' head, he will slow down because his cardio concerns are a little bit more prevalent, right? He did gas out in a Marvin Vettori fight, partially maybe due to missing weight, but it has been kind of a concern throughout his career. He also hasn't been great on the takedown defense. That's why I'm going to pick Gregor Rodrigues. I think if he is able to use his full arsenal, even maybe just striking, but you mixing in that clinch game ever so often, he'll be able to wear out Bruno Ferreira a little bit. I think he'll be able to take over as the fight goes on. You'll see him start to open up on the field a little bit. Obviously, there's definitely a chance that Gregor Rodrigues gets knocked out in this fight. It's happened plenty of times before, but I think Rodrigues can control the pace and be able to knock out Bruno Ferreira late into this fight. Apologize again. All right, we got a lightweight fight between Drew Dober and Michael Johnson. And spoiler alert for this one, I don't I don't judge fights based off of race. And you're gonna see, I guarantee there's gonna be one comment in here that says, oh, Drew Dober's fighting a black guy. Let's all bet on Drew Dober. I'm gonna pick Drew Dober, but that's not why I'm picking Drew Dober. Okay. But anyways, he's a slight dog in this fight. Michael Johnson, slight favorite. Michael Johnson on a 3-fight win streak, however, ever since that really, really bad knockout loss to Diego Ferreira, he's looked very, very good recently, right? His hand speed is still super fast. He still has power in those hands. Not the highest level of competition. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but as we've seen in his past few fights, the dude still got it, right? He's still competing at a pretty high level, right? Just coming off a win over the, now, downtrodden Daniel Zellhuber. But he did win that fight. He did do it as a big underdog. Now he's fighting Drew Dober, who is a slight underdog in this fight. He has gone over a little bit of a worse cascade down the UFC rankings. Did suffer a 3-fight losing streak recently, but then bounced back with a knockout win over Kyle Prepelic to secure his spot as the leader of lightweight knockouts with, I believe, 10. But yeah, he's looked decent in that fight. Did get hurt a little bit, and that's kind of been the theme as of recently for Drew Dober. Chin started to get touched a little bit and started to get hurt a little bit more, right? Suffered a doctor stoppage, not a knockout, but a doctor stoppage against Sheen Silva. Chin looked fine in that fight, but he did get knocked out in the first round against Manuel Torres. But that dude hits like a truck, right? So I'm not too concerned about that. And I think Drew Dober, in this fight in particular, will be able to eat shots from Michael Johnson. I don't think he's going to get put out like in the first exchange or anything like that. I think he's going to be able to eat the shots on Michael Johnson. He will get bloodied up because he gets hit a lot, right? That is something that he does. So tad bit concerning for Drew Dober. Maybe that chin is completely gone, and if that's so, Michael Johnson by KO that might hit. But I think that Drew Dober is going to be able to weather the storm. I think he will be able to find Johnson in the second or third round because as we've seen with Johnson, even recently, you look at that fight against Darius Flowers, even the Zellhuber fight where he gave up the third round, the dude just finds a way to lose these fights. And it's very unfortunate because the dude, the record doesn't show how elite the competition he's been facing, but the dude finds a way to lose fights. And I think Drew Dober is just the exact opposite of that. He could be beating him up for the entire fight, but he just needs that one shot to put people out. He's made a career off it. I think he finds another knockout shot right here at UFC 326. I think he's going to be able to pressure Michael Johnson, and he's going to be able to stay in his face over the course of the fight and find that shot to put Michael Johnson to sleep. So give me Drew Dober to win the fight by KO. All right, bantamweight fight. We got Rob Font taking on the 21-year-old Raul Rosas Jr. This fight was rebooked. I believe it was booked for Noche UFC, Lopez versus Silva card. Rosas had to pull out of that fight, I believe, with the undisclosed injury. Rob Font ended up losing to David Martinez on the same card. And now we got this fight once again. Kind of the similar fight too, right? Just the exact same, striker versus grappler, right? The most one-dimensional people on either side possible. Because you look at a guy like Rob Font, who is an incredible boxer, right? One of the stiffest jabs in the UFC, good combinations after some decent power at his age, but we just seen this guy absolutely struggle so much with the takedown defense. And that, he was with New England Cartel, but he left that gym, but he still even then struggles with a lot of the takedown defense. Just the ability to get back up to his feet. Like, some people don't have great takedown defense, but they're able to get back up and scramble up. His ground game and his get up game is very, very poor. And that's a problem because usually in a striker versus the grappler, you pick the guy that's able to control where the fight is. I know every fight starts standing, but Rosas Jr. is going to guarantee that fight's not going to be standing for long because he's going to be shooting those takedowns. And Rob Font's not going to be able to defend him, in my opinion, right? I know there's concerns with the cardio, right? Raul Rosas has faded. He faded against Richie Lang. Had historically faded really bad against C-Rod and lost that fight, but I think he's gonna be fine here because he's gonna be in his wheelhouse constantly, right? He's gonna be, even if he's tired and shooting these takedowns, I think he's still gonna land them. And then once he's on the ground, he's not gonna be, super gas and giving a bunch of positions and then losing scrambles and stuff like that. Because Rob Font isn't the guy to, scramble out of those positions and try to create, big opportunities or maybe look for reversals and stuff like that. He's just a very safe guy on bottom. He doesn't have great get-ups. I think it's going to work in Rosas' favor. This could be a boring fight. I think it will be a boring fight. I think it's very one-sided. And I tried to find every way to pick Rob Font in this fight, and I was going to pick him originally, but I now rewatched a lot of his recent fights, and I rewatched Raul Rosas's back taking sequences and just the way he controls people on bottom, and I have to go with Raul Rosas Jr. to win this fight. I think he wins the fight by a pretty boring decision. All right, co-main event of the evening, we got Caio Borralho taking on Reinier de Ridder, both off of main event losses, but a little bit of different scenarios there. We got Caio Borralho, who is the big favorite in this fight, coming off the main event loss to Nasruddin Imavov. He was just simply outgunned on the feet by a mile, right? Was absolutely way too slow in the striking. That's a problem for Caio Borralho because I think the main issue a lot of people have with him is his fights are just kind of boring. I think that's due to his reason because he's not a crazy fast starter. Doesn't really extend his combinations outside of a couple punches. Is a good point fighter, right? Can point fight to a lot of decisions, has a good karate base, but I think just, the longevity and, just the danger factor of him is just very, very limited in a lot of these fights, especially at the higher level when he faced these guys that know how to box at a really high level and know how to grapple as well. Caio Borralho's style isn't one that's going to win him a ton of fights, I believe, in the top, top 10, top 5, stuff like that. Reinier de Ridder is one of the fights that I think he's going to win, though, because Reinier de Ridder, pretty sloppy striker, sloppy wrestler, but his bread and butter is the BJJ, right? His BJJ is absolutely top notch in this weight class. Good. My microphone was all the way over there. Good strike, or not good striking. Good. BJJ off bottom and on top. He was on bottom a little bit too much last fight against Brendan Allen, and he literally just quit. He literally quit on the stool against Brendan Allen. So, like I said, two bit different scenarios in that fight. At least Caio Borralho tried to win that fight. Tried to strike with just a better striker, and you just outgunned in that fight. So, credit to him for actually trying all 5 rounds because Reinier de Ridder, as soon as this guy started getting taken down repeatedly, he lost all urgency. He had that Hail Mary triangle in the third round, but after that, it was just one-way traffic. And, part of that is probably due to health concerns, right? I do believe him that he was, absolutely exhausted going into that fight, and his health was garbage. Because he was taking 5 fights a year, right? And he's not a tiny guy for middleweight. He's freaking huge, right? You look at all of his face-offs, and this dude dwarves almost every middleweight in the planet. So it's no wonder he did, start to have cardio concerns. But I just think his striking and his entries are way too sloppy for a guy like Caio to get taken down by. Obviously, there probably might be a time where Reinier de Ridder is in a good position to win the fight because he's just a very opportunistic guy, right? The knees and the sometimes sloppy entries, but sometimes is a bit of genius behind some of that madness. So, there could be a chance where he's in dominant position. I just think Caio's a little bit too good everywhere to fold to a guy like Reinier de Ridder, right? I think he's got, I believe he has a Hoist Gracie black belt as well. Like, I don't really see him getting, put in any big trouble by Reinier de Ridder. I think he's going to be outpointing him. I think his striking is far better than Reinier de Ridder's. I think his takedown defense will hold up as it has in the past. I just think he's just a far better fighter. I think Reinier de Ridder, kind of got a taste of his own hype a little bit too much after that Whitaker fight and, came crashing back to earth. I think now he's in, the place that I think he needs to be where I think he's going to be, beating a lot of these guys that, don't have a full skill set yet. But against a guy like Caio Borralho, I don't think he stands a chance here. I think Borralho wins this fight by decision. And now we got the main event of the evening. This is obviously what everyone's been waiting for. Obviously, if you skip to this fight and skipped all the other breakdowns, I wouldn't blame you because this fight is fucking insane. To be honest, you got Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira, the rematch that isn't really a rematch because the last fight ended in bizarre circumstances. But this fight's insane, right? Both these guys need no introduction. If you haven't watched any of their fights, turn this video off and go watch their fights right now because they are absolutely bonkers. But Max Holloway, phenomenal striker, right? Great volume, all that sort of stuff. Charles Oliveira, best submission artist in the UFC's history, right? Most submissions and most finishes. So these guys are truly two absolute BMFs. And, I'm not going to get into crazy breakdowns and all that stuff, but as you know who these two guys are. But, and, I was going back and forth on this fight. First of all, these odds are a little bit too wide, in my opinion. And I was going back and forth in this fight because there are there are multiple paths for both these guys, right? We've seen Max Holloway shouldn't get cracked as of late, right? He's been dropped in his last 3 fights. So if Charles comes in and is able to, hurt this guy on the feet, I wouldn't be surprised because Oliveira brings that pressure. He brings that power on the feet. And as for, the ground game, I think Oliveira's going to have a big advantage on the ground, right? Because, despite Max Holloway's takedown defense looking, 80-something%, I think the number's a little bit inflated because, anyone that's been able to try take him down has had a little bit of success taking him down, right? Hasn't been submitted since the fight against Dustin Poirier, but, there obviously he hasn't fought anyone like Charles Oliveira. There is no one like Charles Oliveira. That is the catch, right? Because he is, the best MMA submission artist we've ever seen, right? The transition this guy's able to make on top, just the IQ this guy has, at least on the ground, is second to none, right? This guy, the way he's able to use unorthodox submissions to not only get back up to his feet, but end in dominant positions, take guys back so quickly, right? We saw in the last fight against Garbrandt, he used the omoplata lock to get on top, take Gamrot's back, almost finish him in the first round before wrestling and finishing him in the second round, right? That's the thing he does so good, right? He shoots not like clean takedowns, like he won't duck under for double leg, stuff like that, but he gets people in the clinch. He's able to get to that position so quickly, and once he's in there, he's an absolute bully, right? And he uses the Muay Thai with the jiu-jitsu in the clinch, right? Knees, elbows, all that sort of stuff. And he makes people hate it in there, right? If he comes in and finds Max Holloway on the feet or on the ground, wouldn't be surprised because there are paths on both those regions. But I just think, in my opinion, the striking defense of Oliveira has regressed to a point where I think that Max Holloway could find him in this fight because the one thing that I really did not like from Charles Oliveira's last fight, and it was a dominant performance, right? He dominated Mateusz Gamrot. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He was my dog of the week for that fight. I was very confident in him, and it delivered. But the difference between Gamrot and Holloway is that Holloway has the volume, has the speed, and the power on the feet. And we've seen Oliveira a couple of times in that fight, right? Didn't get rocked, but he get hit pretty clean in a lot of those exchanges, right? And again, like I said, for the most part, it was dominant, but you saw, him just charge forward recklessly. And maybe that isn't the same approach he takes in this fight, right? Maybe he does, take his time, use the leg kicks and stuff like that, try to get to the clinch a little bit more frequently. But I just think Max Holloway still has the speed, right? He still has, and he was sitting down on shots as of recently too. Yeah, right? In his last couple fights, right? I believe he has knockdowns in 3 of his last 4 fights. I believe he's hurt his opponents, several times in some of these fights too, right? And that's the thing. He still has the volume, right? He still has the forward pressure, still has, that diverse set of strikes to give a lot of people problems. I think it gives Oliveira problems on the feet too. And I think there's a potential for Max to close this out early, right? When he gets guys hurt, he is absolutely all over them. And I think with Oliveira, I think the problem with him is that his striking defense, it's not, there's no side-to-side head movement. It is just straight back and forth. And Max Holloway will find that chin eventually, in my opinion, right? And maybe I am, and the good, decent see, we got to cut that out. There's a decent probability that I am wrong about this because Oliveira could be, pretty smart about this and just go for the clinch 20 seconds into the fight and try to get this fight to the ground. If he does, I think he probably wins this fight. But I am going to pick Holloway because just what I've seen recently from both these guys, I know Holloway chin is deteriorating. But I still think his striking offense is good enough to be able to catch Oliveira in the spot and put him out maybe early in this fight too. So give Max Holloway to win this fight. I think he knocks out Charles Oliveira in the early rounds, first, second, third round. And so this is the end of the breakdown, right, guys? I really appreciate you guys for watching, for tuning in to these breakdowns. I do try, pretty hard on these breakdowns to give you guys a good experience, a good breakdowns and stuff like that, and to try to break it down as best as I can and give you guys as much details as I possibly can. So I really appreciate it if you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week.